Welcome to the StoryADay podcast. This is Julie Duffy, encouraging you to be a writer today, not someday. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. It is Julie Duffy here from the StoryADay podcast, here to talk about all things writing. And we are heading into the last week of November here as I record this. And I know a lot of you are working on NaNoWriMo projects and a lot of you are not. So I'm going to talk about endings a little bit today anyway. And I am going to talk about them from a short story perspective, but I think anything that I'm talking about here can also be applied to your longer projects. Endings can be difficult for a lot of reasons. One is that first of all, you have to tie up all of the things that you've had fun. You have to doing all through the story. You have to close all those doors that you've opened. You have to shove your characters into a funnel to take them down to the one exit that you want them to go through. And you may not even know what that is yet. So it can be a little difficult and a little overwhelming. So you've got all the logistics of getting the plot points together. But that's not what I'm going to talk about so much today, because you already know about that. There's various ways to end a story. And I think something that I didn't think about for long enough, for a long time until recently, is the emotional impact of the ending of the story being so important. And I read a lot of short stories, as you can imagine. And short stories annoy a lot of people because sometimes they don't seem like they end properly. And I think sometimes they don't. You know, you read stories that have won awards and you're like, but I turned the page and I thought there was more. There's no more. Because even a story with many merits can be hard to end well, especially if you don't want to tie everything up in a neat little bow. So I've been thinking about this for a long time, and I've come to the conclusion that there's a few things you can do that will signal to your reader that the story is over, even if you don't want to be the kind of person who ties all the stories up in a neat bow or wants to write an epilogue, which is, I think, one of the worst ways to end any kind of story. I'm never more annoyed than when I get to the end of a book and discover that the writer has just, written so-and-so did this, so-and-so did that, and, 12 years later, here's what everyone was doing. I'm like, that's not... It takes you out of the emotion of the story, and you've spent all this time with these characters in this emotional place, going through everything with them, going into that world. I mean, I talk about this a lot, where the neuroscience tells us that people can't differentiate between your brain. You can, but your brain at some level can't differentiate between experiences that actually happened and experiences that you've imagined vividly. So it's one of the reasons that fiction is so fabulous, because it helps us to live other lives, and that teaches us to have empathy for other lives. But that's also why it's so important to think about emotion at the end of a story. On a very pragmatic level, you want people to be feeling a lot of emotion at the end of your story, so that when they put it down or scroll on to the next thing, they are feeling emotions and they will remember you and your story because you made them feel stuff. So what do you want people to think to feel as they exit your story? And that's really the lesson I want to talk about today in terms of endings. Is you can get away with an imperfect ending. You might, tying up all the logical details isn't the most critical part of ending any story. It's thinking about how you're going to shepherd your reader and help them transition from this world where they've been with your characters for however long, whether it's flash fiction or epic fantasy. You want to lead them through the transition from being in your world to being out of your world, but still feeling good about having been in your world. And there's a number of ways that you can do this. I have a whole workshop on openings and endings, which I offer. But one of the things that I talk about is, one of the ways to end a story is to bring everything full circle. And So if your story started in a certain place, a certain mood, with certain people around a table, maybe you end the story in a similar sort of mirroring scene where you have either the same people or different people, or, if it was morning in one, then maybe it's night at the end. Something that really signals to the reader that the characters have moved and that we've been on a journey and that we've ended up somewhere else. Other things that you can do is you can have like a little meditation on the theme of the story. And I talk about this in lots of other places on the blog and in workshops and things, but just want to put these ideas in your head today that if you are stressing about the ending of a story, you really don't have to stress about getting all of the threads tied up, especially on a first draft. I think what you really want to be shooting for is the mood of the ending. What do you want it to feel like? Do you want it to be uplifting? Do you want it to be kind of bleak and depressing and thought-provoking? Do you want to make people laugh? Do you want to send them out with a jump scare? How do you want people to be feeling at the end of the story? I think any of those are valid. I think the only ways to end a story that aren't valid are to leave your reader dissatisfied on every level. Like, there will always be readers who are dissatisfied because they wanted this or they wanted that, or they like these kinds of endings. And so you're not going to be able to make every reader completely satisfied, but you want to make them satisfied that on a certain level, this story feels complete because you've taken them on a journey, your character has changed, or your character hasn't changed, but we've seen them reject the opportunity for change, or you've done something with the language that has brought it round into a complete circle, like what I was talking about with if you open with everybody sitting around a kitchen table at breakfast and you close with some people sitting around a kitchen table at supper or a banquet table some other time. These things show that you know what you're doing, shows that that the reader is in good hands, that you have a handle on the craft, that you've taken them somewhere deliberate. So I think if you leave readers dissatisfied, that's the only, completely dissatisfied. If there's no redeeming qualities in your ending, then that's a bad ending, right? So we're going to aim not to do that. And I think the other thing is if you just sort of end and don't give them any kind of emotional oomph with the end of your story. I think that's the other unsatisfying, unacceptable way to end a story. And I understand why it happens, because at the end of any story, we're sort of wrung out. We're sort of tired. We're just desperate to get to the end and get over it. And I hear a lot of people saying things like, "Oh, I'm just no good at endings. I just don't know how to end things." I'm like, well, okay. But they say it as if they don't have to become good at endings. So I want to have you think about the fact that the ending of your story is the last thing that your reader is going to remember about you and about your characters. So I'm not trying to intimidate you. I'm not trying to say that you need to get it right first time. But I am saying that it's worth taking a step past that moment where you say, I'm just not good at endings, or I'm just so tired I want to get this story finished, and really think about how you can become good at endings. It's very important. You want the reader to finish the book feeling satisfied. If you can make them feel a little bit clever, that will endear you to them. If you can send them out with an emotion, that will cement you in their memory. So I encourage you to not write off endings and to really think about going out and finding ways that you can enhance that skill. And if that means forgiving yourself, at the end of the NaNoWriMo month, of course, your ending might be a little sketchy because you're tired, but make notes, go back to the beginning of your story and think about what your hopes and dreams were for this story, that you might, what you really wanted readers to feel when you started this story, and then incorporate some of that into your ending. If you are writing NaNoWriMo this month, congratulations on everything you've done so far. Remember, it's not just about getting to 50,000 words. It's about proving to yourself that you can make writing a priority. It's about, for those of you who've done it before or many years, it can be about, the first couple of years, it's about proving you can write 50,000 words. After that, it might be about proving you can get to the end of the story, and the word count becomes less important to you. Or it might be about rebooting your habit of getting to the desk every day, or every 4 days out of 7, or however many days that you're writing. Remember, this is your challenge. You get to take out of it whatever you need. And what you need may change from year to year and from phase to phase in your writing life and your personal life. So congratulations. Celebrate everything that you've done so far, even if it's just brainstorming a new novel. Put a date on your calendar to start writing it. If you didn't get started during November, January is a very quiet month around here. Where I live, it's cold, it's dark, nobody wants to go out in the evenings. Maybe you do a personal challenge in January to get some writing done. So congratulations to everybody who is doing any writing this month. If you are not working on a NaNoWriMo novel and you have spare time to try out some stories, I would recommend popping over to the StoryADay blog. I do writing prompts almost every Wednesday. This month I've been focused on writing prompts that steal from other intellectual property universes. So fan fiction, basically, or rewriting old stories or rewriting your stories. So there are a couple of writing prompts up there already. One is called Mirror, Mirror, and it's based on that classic Star Trek episode where there's a mirror universe and everything that is good is bad. So I'm encouraging you to take a story and reverse the roles. So there's all kinds of tips at the website for that one. And you would find that at storyaday.org/wow-mirror. And then or you can just come to the site, storyaday.org. And the other prompt that I put up this month so far is one inspired by history. At the beginning of November in Britain, we have Bonfire Night, and there's a whole story behind that. So I tell the story of that on the blog and encourage you to write a story based on that historical story. And you can change it. Now, I talk in the prompt about how you can change it to make it, take a similar story and set it in the future or in the past, or how you can avoid falling down research rabbit holes. So that prompt is called Penny for the Guy. You can find that at storyaday.org. And I've also been doing a thing recently where I've been reading through the 2019 edition of the Best American Short Stories, and I've put up a few of my reviews of those on the site already in the reading room section. So you can either just scroll down the page, or you can go to the menu and look under blog for the reading room posts. And what I do with those is I talk about how the stories open, I talk about how they end, I talk about what the writer does in the middle to either with language or character. I try and analyse a little bit of what's working with those stories. And it's a really interesting exercise for me, and you may find some stories that you're interested in reading. This year's collection I'm really enjoying because it's got some really weird and wonderful stories in it. They're not all... There was a while, maybe a decade or 15 years ago, when this collection was very much navel-gazing, middle-aged white men and women who probably worked at a college and taught writing, and it was just all very kind of pointless to me. But the collections have just been getting better and better as we get more diverse voices and more diverse genres, and there's elements of sci-fi in some of these stories. And so it's a really, really good collection this year, the Best American Short Stories 2019, edited by Anthony Doerr, which kind of surprised me. I didn't expect his taste to be as varied as they are. So good for him. So you can come and find some of those reviews at the site. I think there's 3 or 4 of them up there already, and I'm writing more of them all the time. So I hope that is some inspiration for you today to focus on your endings, to come over to the site and find some writing exercises and prompts and inspiration that you might use, and also to come over and look up those reviews of short stories, because it's always great to be reading great writing. I think that's why we all get into it. But especially if you want to be writing stories, you really should be reading short stories. And it's not just these literary award-winning stories that you should be reading. Find a source of stories that you love, whether it is the Escape Pod podcast series. There's a horror one, there's a science fiction one, or whether it's selected shorts or podcast, or whether it is some, collection of fluffy romance stories or serious romance stories or mystery collections. Whatever you love to read, go and find short stories that light you up and make you think, ooh, I gotta get to my desk. I gotta get to my desk. Or, ooh, look at the way they ended that story. That's really interesting. I wonder if I could try that. Or, ooh, look at that imagery. Maybe I could write a story with something similar. And I like the way they do this. And blah, blah. Anyway, go and read. I know you'll be shocked to hear me say that. So, inspiration, hopefully. Welcome to all the new listeners. Welcome to all the old listeners. Onward and upward. I'm trying to move to a weekly schedule here. I've been doing bi-weekly for a couple of years, and I think weekly is not too much to ask at this point. So I'm going to be coming at you more often with inspiration, writing prompts, pep talks, and I hope you'll be back for more. If you haven't subscribed yet, you can subscribe in your favourite podcast player. Or iTunes, or you can find me on Spotify, and it really does help if you recommend this podcast or rate and review it. But most of all, I want you to carve out some time today, get inspired, do some reading, and most of all, keep writing. Thanks for listening. Why not come over to the blog at StoryADay.org and check out this week's writing prompts and articles. And in the meantime, have a great creative week, and of course, keep writing.